And now, it's time for the Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin.
Hello, listeners. I hope you're doing well as summer is winding down. It's an exciting time for me. Not only am I back in the classroom teaching at our Christian school, but I have a brand new baby niece. How wonderful. We are so thankful for her safe arrival. The doctors had kind of been watching her because she was slow growing. She was in a very low percentile. It is so good to have her here safely, that she was able to be carried full term. And now she is small, but she is so cute and so sweet. And we're so thankful for her. My husband and I are also getting ready for the American Christian Fiction Writers Conference, which is coming up in just a few weeks. We are getting so close. As an author, there is hardly anything more fun than getting together with other authors. It is going to be a blast, and it is not too late. If you are an aspiring author who is interested in attending a wonderful conference, I would encourage you to check out ACFW. You can find out more information at acfw.com, or you can feel free to reach out to me, and I would be happy to help you in any way that I can, as that is coming up the first weekend of September here in Springfield, Missouri. So if you would like to get a hold of me, you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram at author Erin Mifflin, and I would be super happy to help you out. The ACFW conference is one of my favorite things, and just to be a part of the writing community is so amazing. There is a place for you if you have a story in your heart. Today we're talking with Martha Hutchens, author of A Steadfast Heart, which is a mail-order bride Western story. I really love a good Western now and then, and I think that's because I grew up reading that style of book. So there's a feeling of nostalgia for me when I dig into one, and I can't wait for Martha to tell you more about her story. It's a part of the Wind River Mail Order Bride series, and I recently interviewed another author in this series, Wendy Klopfenstein. She got to tell us about her book a few weeks ago, and if you have not heard that interview yet, you can find it on my YouTube channel. Just look up author Erin Mifflin, and it will be there close to the top. When I was growing up, my favorite Western author was Stephen Bly, and he has such a wonderful list of Western titles, both historical and contemporary, that are set in the West, and everything from middle grade, young adult, and then, full-length fiction for grown-ups. And they are just ones that I really enjoy, and they have a lot of family ties to, because we would all read them together. My parents would read them out loud to us, and then, of course, I read them myself when I was even a young reader, and then on through the years. They just hold such good feelings for me. And then Karen Whittemire is, of course, one of the best-known Christian fiction authors writing today, and she's just a wonderful author, and her stories also have a little bit of humor. Her most recent stories have been fairy tale retellings that are set in a Western setting. So think West Texas, but also Beauty and the Beast, Snow White, some of those kinds of things. So if you are interested in those, definitely encourage you to look up Karen Whittemire. Her new series that's coming out after these Western retellings is one that I'm also really looking forward to, because it's about a series of spinsters who are going to find their match. And that's kind of a special topic for me, as I did not meet my husband until I was in my 40s. And so I was pretty much a spinster myself and almost ready to give up on finding somebody. But then it turns out that God did have someone for me, and he wrote us a beautiful love story. And so we're just very thankful that God brought us together, even if it was at a season of life that we had to wait a long time and did not anticipate waiting so long. But God's timing is always perfect. Before we start our interview with Martha, please don't forget to follow me on social media at author Erin Mifflin. I'd be happy to have you there and interacting with my post and just finding out who's the next author I'm going to be interviewing each week as we do these interviews here. And they're so much fun, and I hope that you are enjoying them, finding new authors to read, and also just getting to know some of your favorite authors better. And like I said, if you have any questions about the conference, it's not too late, but it's getting down to the wire. So make sure to reach out to me if I can help you in any way. Now, let's bring in our guest. Hello, Martha, and welcome.
Hi, glad to be here.
Yes, it's good to have you on here.
So first, before we get started, tell me, why is it a llama?
That is a great question. And so llamas are my favorite animal. And kind of when I was growing up, I actually didn't have a favorite animal. My family weren't real big animal people, but as I grew older, I don't know, I just really came to like llamas. They're kind of quirky and fun. They just always made me happy when I see them. And so then one year for Christmas, my sister gave me a stuffed llama, and it was just a lot of fun. And at that time, kind of like Bookstagram was taking off, where people were doing these really pretty pictures with book covers, and visual art is not really my thing, but I was like, you know what? I could take pictures with my stuffed llama. So for a long time, I would do that, just take a picture of whatever book I was reading with my llama, and I just called it the Well-Read Llama. And then that I've kind of fallen off doing the pictures, but when I was starting this radio show, I was like, that's already something that's associated with me, and it's such a fun title. So I said, let's just do the radio program and call it the Well-Read Llama.
Well, that works.
Yeah.
Have you, are there any llamas around where you live so you can actually see the real thing?
No, not really, unfortunately. But, if I go to the zoo or something like that, we always have to go see the llamas.
Very cool, very cool.
Now, your book, A Steadfast Heart, came out a few months ago. What is this story about?
Well, the hero, Drew McGraw, is the oldest of 4 brothers, and they're trying to keep a ranch running in Wyoming. His first wife died, and he has 3 kids. And between the kids and the ranch, he is just not doing well, so he decides he needs a mail order bride. And he chooses the woman that's going to be his mail order bride and goes to meet her in St. Louis and finds out that she had never had any intention of marrying whoever answered her letters. So he leaves the ticket. He gets his other tickets back to Wyoming changed, but they won't refund the original ticket. And so he just crumples it up and leaves it on the ground. Well, my heroine is running from an arranged marriage, a really awful arranged marriage. And she gets to the train station and finds the ticket and picks it up and goes to Wyoming, thinking that at the very least she can be a nanny for the kids. But they choose to do a marriage of convenience so that his kids will have a mom and she'll be protected from her brother.
All right. Well, marriage of convenience is one of my favorite tropes. This is sort of like mail order bride and marriage of convenience crossed together. Huh?
Yep, it is. And it's also, mail order bride with a twist, because it's not the original choice that ends up there.
Yep. Now, A Steadfast Heart was published with Sunrise Publishing, which just has a really neat model of connecting authors with mentors. And how did you get connected with them?
Well, when I started with Sunrise, they were holding blind audition, and they haven't done that in a while. I don't know if they're going to pick it back up or not, but I submitted a sample of my writing and then wrote about my writing experience and an idea for the novel that I might write. They gave you an overall, it's going to be a mail order bride in Wyoming with 4 brothers that are ranchers. And so then you came up with an idea that fit those parameters. So based on what they received from the first round, they chose 10 finalists. Then you had to write the first chapter for your proposed novel, and you'd submit that. And from that, they chose the 4 people who would be selected to be a part of season 10.
Very nice. And did you enjoy the process of writing with a mentor and the other authors in your season?
I can't speak highly enough for how much I learned from working with my mentor, Lacey Williams. I highly recommend her work. Her new series on the Wagon Train is really a lot of fun. The job that Sunrise and Lacey did on my launch is just incredible. The editing that they did was very good. It's almost unheard of for a debut novel to launch like mine did. So I just am so grateful for all the work they did to make that possible. Working with my draft authors, my fellow draft authors, was an important part of the process. When you first start with the Sunrise, when they present the idea, they presented it with video, and part of the video is they're warning you that this is not easy. They compare it to boot camp. And it's true. It's not easy. So having some people going through it with you was such a great blessing, and we still meet on a regular basis to cheer each other on.
Oh, that's fantastic. Have you always wanted to be a writer?
That's kind of a funny story. Not really. I was in my late 20s, and I've always been a voracious reader, and I was reading this book, and I wanted to throw it across the room, and the thought went through my head that even I could do better than this. Well, putting that challenge before God is not necessarily a good idea, because he might take you up on it.
Yes.
I noticed that as I started the process, after a while, I noticed that every time I needed something to go to the next step, it was there, whether it was a book I found or another mentor, because, Judith Lansdowne helped me so much early on. She wrote a lot of others, but that one was my favorite. I started to decide, hey, this is really what God wants me to do, and I carried it to the point that I actually got a rejection letter that said, hey, this isn't for us, but we'd like to see anything else you write. And that was the point when God told me I was done, that he had something else for me to do. And I was not real happy to hear that.
Yeah.
So I argued with him, but I lost, of course. And once I finally said, okay, whatever you want, it was 3 days later that I learned I was pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And Sarah was born with immune delays, well, first colic, and then she had immune delays and physical delays. She's outgrown most of it, but she was so sick, just constantly sick. I couldn't have written and gotten, she was in the doctor's office and the physical therapist office just constantly. And then we ended up homeschooling her, partly because of her immune issues, because we knew putting her in public school was going to be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Partly for faith reasons as well, of course. And as she got to be, I think she was about 10 when I finally realized, hey, I'm actually taking her to gymnastics and spending a fair amount of time waiting for her at the gym. I bet I could write about now.
Yes.
And so that's when I picked it back up. And I also thought it was interesting that I won the Golden Heart the year before she graduated high school and left for college. And it's like, okay, it may have been delayed for a long time, but now it's time.
Wow. Yes, that was quite the journey from, kind of getting close to publication as far as, someone who's interested in more of your work, and then stepping back for a time, and then, again, a season writing and just waiting for God to open the right door. So you never know, do you, when those doors will open or close?
No, it's a long journey. No matter who you are and how you learn it or where you start, it's always a long journey. So it's shorter for some than others, but it's still always long.
Yes. Now, what writing project are you working on now?
The first thing I wrote was a Regency, because at that point, that was about the only clean romance that you could really write. But then I worked with some World War II stuff. And that is really the time period that I love, because, the stakes for everybody were so high. The farmer in the field that's feeding the troops, the fate of the world is on his shoulders,
Mm-hmm.
But I love the historical, and so when the Sunrise option came forward with the Western, I started working in that time period. But now that that's done, I've gone back to World War II, and the story that I'm working on is about a unacknowledged illegitimate princess who is asked to step up to save her royal siblings from the Nazis. And of course, she has a hero coming with her every step of the way, even though when it starts, he doesn't want to be there.
Well, that sounds interesting. I haven't read a lot of, well, I mean, I have read a lot of World War II stories, but I don't think I've read many that are actually set with like a royal angle to it. So that sounds very interesting.
I really enjoy, it's like my, I guess, not exactly guilty pleasure, but you know what I mean, the lighthearted reading type. I really enjoy the royal stories. They're so much fun. And I was reading one and I just thought, maybe I should write a royal story. I like them so much. And I thought, no, because I really do like this time period. And then I thought, wait a minute, maybe I should write a royal story in World War II. That'd work.
Yeah, well, that is great. I know there is quite a market for them as well. That is something that a lot of people enjoy reading.
Mm-hmm.
So now you and I met through our local writing group. Do you recommend writing groups for aspiring authors?
I really do. I wish there had been something like that close to where I was when I was starting out. In South Carolina, I was still too new then, really, and the closest group that I could work with was in Atlanta. And then in New Mexico, I mean, everything is a long way apart there.
Right.
Particularly where I lived, because I lived in Los Alamos, and that town was actually started where it was because of how far it was from everything else. So you can kind of if you can't have an in-person group, you can kind of find a lot of support online, and it does help. But there's nothing like being able to sit down and talk with other writers and tell them about the last rejection you got and how it said, we're sorry, but your writing just doesn't meet our standards. Yes, I got that rejection letter.
Yeah.
Plus, you don't know what you don't know. I mean, I know that's a cliche, but there's a reason it's a cliche. No matter how far along you are, there's still so much that you don't know, and so much you can learn from that person who's just starting out, but, maybe they have a degree in marketing, or you see what I mean?
Yeah, it can be overwhelming when you first start, and I think, I think about that when someone new visits our group and, here we are, those of us who've been doing this for a while, we're talking about agents and editors just by their first name. And, if we mention certain publishers, we know what kind of books they're looking for. This is just all knowledge that we have gained, and then it's kind of like common knowledge. But if you're just starting out, it sounds like it's another language when you're talking about all of these different things.
Oh, yeah. And we have our acronyms, just like every other, it's what does POV mean actually?
Right.
Which for the listeners, that's point of view. Or my favorite, which is RUE, resist the urge to explain.
Yes. Yep. We have to do that. We have to make sure that we are staying in our character and not explaining every little thing. Now, listeners who are familiar with your newsletter will know about your black miniature poodle, Clark. How did Clark come to be part of your family?
Clark is quite the character. He really is, as you know from my newsletter if you read it. We decided we were going to get a dog. And at this point, we lived in the mountains of New Mexico. And there are lions and coyotes and bears everywhere. And the bears, they mostly are just going to go for the garbage cans. You're not going to have too much trouble with them unless you run across a mom with cubs, which I have done on occasion. Don't recommend that one. But the mountain lions will take pets out of yards, and the coyotes will really take pets out of yards. In fact, there was one story of a coyote that attacked a dog that someone was walking on leash. I'm going to assume it was a long leash, but still, that's really scary. So even though I grew up with pit bulls and German shepherds and American bulldogs and really big dogs, and I love them, we knew that we couldn't have a dog that needed to be outside. And my dogs that I had at that point in time, we kept them in with us when we were home, but they were pretty much outside when we weren't, and they liked it. I couldn't imagine them being happy being indoors all the time. And so we decided we needed to go with something a little smaller. And all of my research, I started looking up, it's like, hey, if I like German Shepherds and Pit Bulls, what small breed would I like? And I couldn't believe when all of my research turned up poodles. I was like, no, those are some silly little frou-frou dog. That's not what I want. But everything I turned up said that, and then it was like, well, people have less problems with allergies. Well, my daughter had allergies, and I thought, oh, all I need is for her to develop an allergy to the pet dog. That would just not be good. So I thought, well, okay, maybe it is a poodle we need. So I started calling and looking and finding what breeders were around, and also checked shelters, but at least where we lived, there weren't many small dogs going to shelters. There was one poodle that turned up in the shelter in our town, and we went to see it. And I really thought that was going to be our dog because he was such a sweetheart with my daughter and me. So I called my husband and said, hey, when you come get off work, you need to come over to the shelter because I think I found our dog. And when my husband got there, he was so afraid of my husband.
Aww.
And I just said, well, it's pretty obvious that some adult male, because I won't give whoever it was the honor of being called a man, had mistreated the dog, and we just knew he wouldn't be happy in our house. I mean, we could have eventually convinced him that my husband was a good guy, but it just wasn't going to be a good fit. Broke my husband's heart.
Yeah.
He just hated seeing that dog cringe away from him. So we scheduled with a breeder, and we thought that we were going to go up and get Clark's sister, Ellie. That's who we thought was going to be our dog. And when we got there, Clark just turned on the puppy charm. He was about 4 months old, and he was running around and would hit the brakes so hard that his hindquarters would go up in the air. And yeah, it was like, that's our dog.
Yeah. So that's another kind of long journey story for you, isn't it?
Yeah. Sorry if I'm taking too long.
Oh, no, you're fine. But that just kind of brings me back to another question I wanted to ask you. And so with your first book just recently being published after such a long wait, and, you know, we're talking about more than 2 decades here.
Yeah, it was a very long time.
What is some encouragement that you would have for any listeners who might also be in the waiting stage of their writing journey, or even if they just have a story that they're thinking about starting and they're like, you know, maybe it sounds overwhelming, but what is some encouragement that you would have for them? Well,
first I would say it's really hard. Are you sure that A, this is what you want to do, and B, this is what God's called you to do? If the answers to both of those are yes, then I guess, strap in and plan on a long journey. But God He will give you the path. Like I said earlier, when I first started, and I didn't know, my first book I wrote in a spiral notebook. And every time I needed something, every time I needed to learn the next step, I still remember the first coach I had who was so kind and just said, I think your book might be stronger if you didn't use the word was 20 times on the first page.
Yeah.
Nobody is an overnight success. So accepting that as you go in helps, and finding people to stand beside you helps. And if this is where you're supposed to be, if this is what God has for you, then He will make it happen. And it's not your job to make it happen. It's just your job to show up.
That's really good. Yeah, I've gone through times where I have questioned, is this really what God has for me? And He just keeps opening the right doors at the right time. And I am still waiting for publication myself, but there's just so many things along the path that He just shows you. This is what I have for you. Just keep walking, taking one step at a time. And then, like you said, we have to leave the results to Him and trust that He's going to work out exactly what needs to happen in our lives, in our readers' lives, and all of these things.
There's one thing that, and I don't think this is necessarily encouraging, but advice nonetheless, is avoid the temptation for shortcuts, because most of the shortcuts are actually scams. Definitely early on, start watching the Writer Beware website. again, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So a shortcut is probably not going to get you where you need to be.
So now, when it comes to your stories, why is writing faith-filled inspirational fiction important to you?
I think it's because faith is so important to me in life. And life is so hard anyway. Without faith, it's just, I can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just an outpouring of my own life more than anything. I didn't necessarily plan it because, to tell you the honest truth, I mean, I've been doing this a really long time. And when I started, Christian fiction wasn't exactly a wide field.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it's just, I think it just comes from me more than anything.
Yeah. It's just important to you, and so that just naturally comes out in your stories.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is there a scripture that's been meaningful to you recently?
I was going through a really rough year. I'm trying to think. It was 2019, I believe. And, 2020 was bad for everybody.
Right.
But trust me, I would do 2020 3 times over before I'd do 2019 again.
Yeah.
But every time I turned around, somewhere, somehow, I'd either hear it on the radio or see it written or whatever. And it was Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. So that has kind of become my, I guess, life verse. Although I would like to say I chose something more obscure, but it's just, that's the one.
Yep.
And it's trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your path straight.
And really, that is the guideline that we need most of all.
Mm-hmm.
Know the Lord and then just trust him and follow him. Now, how can readers connect with you?
My website has links to my stories, and that is marthahutchens.com. If you go there, you can sign up for my newsletter and find out all about what Clark has been up to lately.
Yes.
His latest argument was with trash cans that had lids.
Oh, dear.
He doesn't think that's a good idea.
And now you also have a free novella for your newsletter subscribers. Is that right?
That's correct. And it is the story of one of my hero's children in A Steadfast Heart.
Well, very good. So I hope listeners will go over and check that out. Listeners, please do visit marthahutchens.com to learn more about Martha and her stories. Let me spell her name for you. marthahutchens.com. That's Hutchens with an E. And as I mentioned earlier, I did interview another author in the Sunrise series a few weeks ago. So that's Wendy Klopfenstein. You can find her interview if you go to my YouTube page, look for author Erin Mifflin, and you will find Wendy's interview close to the beginning. Now, some of the other authors in this series are Lacey Williams as the mentor, Wendy Gallinetti, and Tracy Summerall. So if you are a fan of mail order brides with a twist, should definitely look up the Wind River series. Before we go, please don't forget to follow me on social media at author Erin Mifflin or visit my website, authorerinmifflin.com, to sign up for my monthly newsletter. I'd be honored to have you along for the ride. Until next time, happy reading!
Join us next week for another episode of The Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin. If you'd like to find out more about author Erin Mifflin, visit her Facebook and Instagram accounts.